documentary filmmaker. I grew up in Southwest Pennsylvania. I live here in Oakland now. So a lot of the work that I make, I feel like first and foremost it's important to think about where you're from, what your community is, and what experiences you've had in your own life that are unique. And then using those experiences in your own life to frame what kind of stories you want to tell in the media that you make, no matter what kind of media you make. I happen to be a documentary filmmaker. So this film, I came about working on it because, for very personal reasons, myself and a lot of my family members and close friends are members of the LGBT community, and I feel like there's not a lot of media made about LGBT people that is made by LGBT people. And a lot of the stories that we hear about LGBT people are almost tragic in nature, like, oh, woe is me, it's so hard to live in a small town as a gay person. So I approached this film with flipping that script and wanting to show the resiliency of gay communities in small towns, and wanting to go back to a place that is close to where I grew up. A lot of people in Appalachia, which is the region that you see in this film, feel a lot of discontent with people who make media about their communities. Because often people in Appalachia are painted as, like, you know, toothless hillbillies that don't have any education and they're white trash that live in this place. So I think it's important to make work that breaks down those stereotypes and helps people understand communities that they're not a part of.
Thank you for sharing. We're gonna get back to this discussion about, you know, representation and in your work as a filmmaker. But let's get to know a little bit more about Pendarvis Harshaw's work.
How y'all doing today, man?
Cool, we're cool. We're in the throes of already recording, as you can see.
Recording voice. Hello.
So I don't know anything about.
Okay, so you want me to introduce this bass? All right, here we go. This is the bass.
Yeah.
Upright bass, acoustic bass, double bass.
First love, or piano before any other.
Yeah. Yeah, this is just special, you know, because it's like I can hide behind it. It's like I can show what I can do, but I'm simultaneously hiding.
What would you define, or what's the proper title for the type of music you make? You're shaking your head. Why are you shaking your head?
Because I hate those things. But I would like to call my music Black American music. There's a guy named Nicholas Pagan who actually coined that term. He called it BAM. Because, you know, we're not the ones who necessarily named our music. Like labels and execs and all people who make money named it. And, you know, a lot of us don't listen to only hip hop or only jazz or only soul or only gospel or only pop or funk or rock or any American music. We listen and make all, especially as musicians, to pick one is like lame, but I will call this album R&B soul because it kind of mixes everything together. In the darkest nights, I can see the moon.
All right. Pendarvis Harshaw is a journalist and filmmaker from Oakland. He's the author of OG Told Me, a memoir about his growing up in Oakland. I read it, it's really good. And he's the host of KQED's weekly radio show, Right Nowish. Pen, can you tell us how were you able to carve out your own space in public radio? And also, like, how do you find your stories like this one that we just...
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. Hi, everybody. Let's see. Start at the origin. I told my own story, and so through being able to like use my coming of age narrative, I really kind of developed a brand about talking about Oakland, having a unique perspective on things happening in the Bay Area, and people started to take note of it. And one of the people was my current editor over at KQED, who's been following me on social media for like 5-7 years or so. And so when a job opening came up, he said, hey, Pen, I know this isn't necessarily what you do, but maybe you can bring some of your flavor to KQED. So I think one of the biggest things that I want to tell you all about today is how like you have to put your best foot forward first. Before anybody else creates a platform for you, you have to create your own platform. And so that's what I've done through media since I was like 16, 17. I came up through a program called Youth Radio, which is not too far from here in Oakland. And okay, yep, there we are. Yeah, all right, shout out. There it is. And then this story in particular, Anissa Strings. I found out about Anissa, like, I'm sitting at a table having dinner with a friend, like late night at what used to be Rudy's Can't Fail Cafe in downtown Oakland. Anissa walks in, he's like, man, you should check out her music. She's an upright bassist. I'm like, I don't know too many black women from East Oakland who are upright bassists who travel the world. I gotta know your story. And so just something as genuine as that, that's what leads to the stories that I tell.
Thank you for sharing. So let's get to know about Contessa's work.
Toxic masculinity, what does that mean?
Boys don't cry. Boys are tough.
That ain't faggots. That's for punks. That's for sissies. If you keep crying, I'm gonna give you something to cry for. It can be dangerous to be a feminist in prison. We all had these great dreams and stuff when we were little kids, but at some point it was more important for us to be tough. It was more important for us to not back down.
I want the power that comes with vulnerability. But I love being a man at the same time.
Many times we tell ourselves, in order for me to survive, I have to be a man.
You stepped on my ego, I'm feeling some type of way. Bam! Mama loves you. That shit didn't mean nothing when I went to school.
People gotta hear me, like you can't just lock me up in here and I don't matter for the next 8.5 years.
And a lot of them come out even worse than they were before.
We cannot challenge our harmful behavior without challenging patriarchy.
On a real note, how you guys expect me to do that?
Orange jumper, oversized, tears fill my parents' eyes. Judge gave me 40 life, 40 days, 40 night. Prayed the passion, son.
We don't gotta live like this, y'all.
Give me
When
life,
we be on these
demons
streets,
hunt me every night.
the
I
circumstances are
contemplate
different.
a suicide.
Will we react the same then?
We're a part of a movement.
The whole part of existing in this world has nothing to do with being a man. It has everything to do with being human.
Filmmaker Contessa Gales tells stories about identity, movement, and social change, with a focus on race, ethnicity, and gender. She formerly worked at CNN, where she created award-winning content, including the documentary you just saw a clip of, The Feminist on Cell Block Y. Contessa, can you tell us about your experience creating this film and how it represents your overall work?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming and listening and watching. So, as Deb said, I formerly worked at CNN, and I've now transitioned into independent filmmaking and full-time freelance work to support my independent filmmaking. So, I think what I have the opportunity to create as an independent filmmaker is yet to be determined. But when I was at CNN, it was really important to me, speaking of the theme of this panel and representation, to make sure that while I was in that space where I was one of the few people in the room that looked like me, to really make sure that I was at the table and I wasn't maintaining the status quo as far as the types of stories that we were telling and the way that we were telling them. So I directed The Feminists on Cell Block Y for CNN Digital. So it went on CNN Go, which is their streaming platform, and online. So you can see it online. It's accessible to everyone without having to pay for it. It was an opportunity to cover topics that are really important and kind of ubiquitous in the news about the ways in which people are trying to discover and understand masculinity and the system of patriarchy and things like toxic masculinity, and it comes up in a lot of different ways. You know, every time we talk about mass shootings, people are trying to figure out, you know, what's the undercurrent that's happening in our country. With the Me Too movement, you know, what's the undercurrent and what's the ecosystem in which, you know, things like sexual harassment in the workplace and sexual violence can happen. And so this film was an opportunity to kind of talk about all of those things in a really unexpected setting, which was in a prison in Soledad, California, not far from here, where an incarcerated man was leading this effort within the prison when he was incarcerated at the time. He's since been out for about a year and a half. Yeah, and when I learned about the work that he was doing and that it was something that he kind of initiated and was led by him, it made it even more special that it was something that was coming from within and not being imposed from the outside. And those are the things that really drew me to the story, and I think that it resonates much more widely beyond folks who are incarcerated or who've been touched by the criminal justice system, because the themes that it deals with are universal.
So before we move ahead with other questions, we want to get a sense of who is in the audience. How many of you guys are already working with documentaries or films in general? Okay. How many of you have published your first story?
Even putting it on YouTube counts as publishing.
Yes.
That counts. People see it.
Okay. How many have published several stories here? Good. How many of you are ready to take their jobs?
Everybody.
Okay. Watch out, you guys. Okay. Well, I was looking at statistics, you know, we always go there, yes. And about 70% of newsroom employees, those who work as reporters, photographers, and videographers in the newspaper, broadcasting, and internet publishing industries, are white and male. So in this scenario, I want to hear from you guys, and also reflecting on the title of this panel, which is the power of representation. Does it matter who is behind the camera, or in your case, behind the microphone? So who gets to tell whose stories? Does it matter? And why?
I'd love to hear your experience at CNN.
Yeah, I think it obviously matters. There's a long history since the beginning of media making and filmmaking in the U.S. in which the people behind the cameras and the people doing the storytelling all look the same way, and as Deb just cited, is for the most part kind of unfortunately still continuing, and you can see that reflected in the stories that are told, where minority communities and folks that are marginalized systemically, politically, by the institutions of a society are represented in a way that allows for that to continue, right? So if you can put people in stereotypical boxes, and if you can dehumanize them through media, it allows this project of, you know, taking people's rights away to continue. It allows for people to not see us in our full humanity, and allows justification of why that happens. So media is a super important tool, and representation is super important. And I think that until there are more of us who are behind the camera telling the stories of our own communities, we're going to continue to see this lack of nuance, this lack of depth, this decontextualization, and just more stereotypical representations of us and our communities. So it's vitally important that we are behind the cameras and calling the shots, not just in lower level positions, because I think what's happening now, especially in newsrooms, is that with these diversity and inclusion initiatives that are happening, you know, the higher ups can kind of point to, look, we have greater numbers of folks now, but these people aren't necessarily in managerial positions or the executive level kind of producer positions where they're allowed to call the shots, at least more so than if they're entry level reporters, entry level storytellers. we need to be in, every ranking of these institutions. And also, once we're invited to the table, we need to also know and know within ourselves that we can speak up, and that it's not just, oh, I'm so grateful to be here, thank you for allowing me to be here, but that our voices are vitally important and they're sorely missing, and that we need to feel empowered that we can bring what we want to bring to the table.
So, of course I spilled my water.
okay.
I knew that was happening. Sorry.
Thanks, Dad.
So think about it this way. I'm a woman. So imagine being a woman behind the camera, and I'm interviewing a real example that happened. Interviewing a woman about sexual assault that she experienced. Get serious. And imagine that what she's able to relate to and trust in me to tell me her story and share it with me in a place that feels safe and not like extractionary or abusing of her story. She trusted me a lot more for this particular project than if I was a man behind the camera sitting with her and asking her exactly the same question, just by the very nature of the fact that we could relate on a real level of both being women in America who have experienced something of this nature, or who have known people who are women in America that experience this. So I think it's important to think about it like to have that representation behind the camera, but then to also use that representation that you have to interview and to tell the stories of people who have that same representation as you, to like make that safe space for people that maybe someone who didn't have that identity or that experience wouldn't be able to tell that story as truthfully and as trustworthily.
Yeah, I think that's really important. That's something that I learned early on in being like, obviously you can see who I am, right? I'm a black man from Oakland, telling stories largely about black folks from the Bay Area, right? And it's a head scratcher when it backfires. That's one of the things I just want to throw out there. Like, sometimes I'll approach people specifically, like the OG Told Me project, where I'm interviewing older black men in the community, and I did it for 5 years, and I'm talking to like OG, like pimps, preachers, you name it, all across the board. And I'm going up to them, I'm saying, hey, I'm a journalist, I'd love to interview you. And maybe a handful of times, I got reactions like, you're not a real journalist, from older black men, because that's the way they've seen journalists. They've seen journalists to not look like me. And so it's interesting when that happens. And I just wanted to make sure that that's thrown out there. But the question was the importance of representation.
Yeah. And who is behind the microphone? Does it matter who is behind?
It matters on all levels, as was said before. And what I'm realizing more and more is that editor's position, the person who makes that say and what clip goes on air, like that is really important. So having agency when you are invited to the table is really important, and not to feel like an imposter. I know I worked for an outlet that was reporting on technology in Silicon Valley before, and I felt like an imposter. I was like, I don't even know this world, and I didn't exhibit my own agency, and that's why I fell short. And so now at KQED, I'm making sure to show and have some say and put my foot down when they pronounce something wrong or something of that nature. So yeah, it's really important.
Yeah, and also let's make sure, like, when we are talking about diversity, we're talking about, race diversity, geographic diversity, gender diversity, economic diversity, age diversity. When I'm older, I want to keep telling stories, right? So I think we get to, incorporate all the people into storytelling. We just watched some awesome clips of you guys, right? You've gotten awards and recognition, etc. But everyone starts somewhere. So I want to challenge you guys to go back in time when you're just beginning in the field of media. What type of work were you doing?
So when I was in high school, I grew up in a really small town, so we didn't have like this. Like, this is amazing that you all are just here at a youth media summit, like engaging with your community. So props to you. On a Saturday. So I had a high school yearbook class that I had access to a DSLR camera for, and I shot pictures of football. And I hate football, sorry. But I was like, cool, I get something to make visuals of. And through that, finding ways that I could tell stories. I took self-portraits of myself. I took portraits of my friends and of my family. And then I realized I wanted to be a photographer and go to photography school. So whether you're in middle school or college or high school, because I know we got a lot of different age groups here tonight, you all probably have a phone. If you don't have a phone, you could buy a disposable camera. You can record audio on that phone. You can take pictures on that phone. You can write on paper, which we forget we can do these days. But there is access for all of you to tell stories and to start doing this type of work. So, we're all kind of established at this point in our career, but we all started somewhere.
For me, I started in college. I had a radio show that was like a talk radio show, and I interviewed local musicians and artists, and that was kind of my first introduction to media making. And I also wrote for the undergraduate newspaper in school, and it wasn't until a few years after that that I kind of went into the filmmaking direction. But even before it was like in any kind of formalized way in school, and I think this speaks to like what is accessible to you and kind of who's behind the camera telling which stories. I started filming my little brother, who was like really into reptiles and amphibians in like a way that was very fascinating and unusual.
Where did you publish this story? I want to check it out.
None of this is published, although he will eventually have some show along the lines of like a Steve Irwin situation. But I filmed him, with like alligators and stuff, and it was just like what was right in front of me, and that was, I guess, with my dad's like handy cam. So that was the earliest things, is like documenting family.
The best art is local. Like the best art starts most times inside of yourself, but if not inside yourself, inside the house, inside the community. With that being said, I started off as a rapper. But I'm a firm believer in the theory of 10,000 hours. If you invest 10,000 hours in anything, you become a master of it, right? So when I was writing raps about cracking jokes on my friends in middle school, I was actually practicing my script writing ability, my ability to write narrative, and this is my first perspective, if you will. And what led me to go to youth radio was wanting to be on the radio so I could make music and be on air. And soon enough, they showed me that you can tell stories that don't have to rhyme and don't have to cuss. And I still pursued my rap career, but I tried it from a different angle, where literally in 2005, I went to an event at the Henry J. Kaiser Center in Oakland, and I had that disposable camera, and I just wanted to meet Keith the Sneak, who was a big rapper at the time. And see you laughing like, yeah, Keith, right? In 2005, right? And I was using journalism as a way to meet all these rappers, because they wouldn't talk to me if I were just like, hey, another rapper. But I'm like, hey, I'm a journalist. I'm interested in your story. They're like, oh, well, I will talk to you now. I'll give you the time of day. And sure enough, I realized journalism pays a lot more than rapping, and there's a lot more longevity. You can be a 75-year-old journalist, 75-year-old rappers, not so much. So, yeah, that's why I got here.
Okay. Yes, I want to switch to talking a little bit about your creative voice and maybe finding or identifying your voice as a storyteller. For me, I think it was so overwhelming in the beginning just to learn like the ins and outs of filmmaking and journalism in general, that I rarely had time to stop and think about what type of stories that I like to tell and what is my mission as a filmmaker. So if each of you could briefly share how is your creative process, and when did you figure out like this is what I want to do? And can be any of you or one of you. Yes.
Still figuring it out.
I'm still figuring out. This is
That's a hard question.
I'll take it. I think it is an ever-changing creative process, but I realize that it goes hand in hand with life. And so as I mature and grow as a human, it relates or informs how I grow as a journalist and vice versa. And journalism has taught me a lot. It's taught me, a lot about accountability, showing up on time, spell checking, things that can translate into things that you need in your personal life as well. It's all trial and error, and I'm still learning, and I still feel young at it, even thinking that like I've been doing it for half my life, but I still feel like I'm still learning, and the one thing I can say is that it's all trial and error and constant experiment. I'm sorry, that was about like learning the
Yeah.
Did I answer that right?
I feel like the work that I've made that speaks most truly to like who I am is exactly that. It's work that I've made that has a level of me that I've put in it. Because I feel like as journalists, we're often told that we have to be objective and we have to be separate from the story to keep it unbiased to our public service. And maybe that's why I got more into documentary filmmaking, because I just felt like there's so much importance in putting yourself in your work. And like for work, we interview people, we ask people questions. And we're sitting with them in sometimes what can be some of their most intimate times in their life, the most difficult times in their life, or even just like, spending the whole day of 4th of July with some strangers and filming them watching fireworks. Like it could be as simple as that. But for me to be able to relate to them on a down-to-earth level and like share myself with them as much as they're sharing with me, that's when I feel like the best work is made. So like no matter what story you're telling, like find that one part of you that you can bring out to relate to them with, and that'll really help you find like your own creative voice and like put that in your work.
I came prepared with a quote because Deb said I could use quotes for when I got stumped by a question. Okay, so Ava DuVernay recently in an interview with Vulture magazine was talking about When They See Us, her Netflix series that recently came out. And this quote like really stuck out to me, and I think spoke a lot to what drives me as a filmmaker and my purpose. So she says, every time a filmmaker of color makes a film, it's a rescue effort. It's an act of resistance and defiance to use tools that were kept away from us, tools that were used to harm us for so long. I think it's something that drives me as a filmmaker and as a woman of color in this industry to kind of think about ways that storytelling can set the record straight or correct an imbalance that has existed for so long. And that, I think, is what I try to approach every piece that I'm working on with. And it could also go in a completely different direction where, we're used to these kind of negative stereotypes as communities of color and people from marginalized communities of us in the media, and so there's like a tendency to like go the opposite direction and be like, we're kings and queens and put ourselves on pedestals, and I think that also can be harmful, or at least not telling the whole picture. So I'm trying now in my work as like a cinematographer and even as an editor, taking moments from other things that other people have shot, and then in creating my own stuff as a director, to think about like the moments in between those two extremes, and showing people of color in their like full spectrum of humanity, the boring everyday moments that exist in between, if we're under someone's foot and if we're on top of a pedestal.
Thank you for sharing. So before we get to audience questions, I want people to leave this panel with some practical tools that they can use, like if they want to set out on the same direction as you guys. So can each of you share quickly what has helped you in your career? And it can be tools, like any piece of advice. And also, I'm curious to know, can you make money in this field, and how do you survive? How do you keep yourself sustainable?
So when I was in college, first thing I want to say, you don't have to go to college to make media, but you can go to college to learn more about making media. So first thing, that's the blanket. When I was in, train of thought? Oh, okay. So when I was in college, I wanted to be a staff photographer at a newspaper. And then I realized, like, how many of us read newspapers? Not many people read newspapers anymore. So those jobs disappeared. And it was very sad for me because I was like, this is what I want to do, and my like dream career path is disappearing from the workforce. So from that, I had to get creative, and I decided I wanted to be an independent filmmaker. And there's like many different ways to get there. Residencies is a one option, internships in college or internships after high school. But I think we have to get creative in this workforce now to make money, and that looks like, you know, figuring out what are all the different hats that you can wear and what are all the different skills that you have. So for me, I'm a producer, I'm an editor, I film, I photograph, I write grants, I email people all the time, like having all of these different skill sets, and like all of you in this room must have at least like 5 really amazing skills that you could list in media itself or even beyond that. And figuring out how you can make all of those together in a melting pot to like build your own career. Kind of what Penn was saying, like you're your own starting point and you're your own platform to build like whatever you can contribute in this industry. So that, and then I would also say like, take a personal finance class if you go to college. They're really helpful. Like I am my own boss. I run all my own finances, all my own taxes at the end of every year. And it sounds daunting, but like it's also really empowering once you realize that like you can be the master of your own money. So that's about it.
I would echo everything that Emily just said about having a diversity of skill sets that you know that you can market. I also shoot and edit and produce, and so it makes it so that I'm not limited to only doing one type of work as a freelancer, which helps. And I also think that I hate networking, and it is unfortunately just like a part of how you get yourself out there. You could be like super talented and think that, you know, just based on the merit of your work that you should, you know, be flushed with cash and working all the time. But if you're not meeting people, then, you know, it's not gonna happen. And I can say that as someone who recently moved to the Bay from New York without really any network here, that it's just something that you have to do. So go to events and be friendly and put yourself out there and connect with people that you wanna work with. Because, you know, you'll work for them and then they'll work for you, and it's just like building community, I think, is really important to sustainability.
Okay, I think I got it. I got the answer for you, right? Taking notes. I see you over there taking notes. You're gonna get an A. All right. These things. I wish I would have known about this when I was in high school, but I learned about it somewhere in college. You don't have to go to college to be a journalist. Keep that in mind. But it did boost my confidence a lot, and it made me feel like, okay, I can actually do this, and not be a limited just writer, but a broad storyteller. And these are the things that really helped me. 1, a network. 2, a skill set. 3, a product. 4, education. 5th, management. So again, network, degree, skill set, product, management. I'm still learning management. Time management is hard as hell. But that network, you've had that since elementary school. Like you've started developing your network already. This is you developing your network just by showing up today. That degree, it can be in any field you choose, but it would behoove you to do something that informs your passion. You know, so I say go to school for something you have to go to school for. A product, I have a book on the market, and so that can sell like in my sleep, and I can make a little money off of that, right? And the skill set is never, like I'm still adding skills to it, and that you should forever grow your skill set. And that management thing, like take a class or whatever, like be somebody's understudy. But those 5 things really have helped me stay afloat. It doesn't mean that you'll be rich, but it means you'll never be broke. And so that I really take those to heart. And brand yourself, like constantly push yourself out there. And it doesn't have to be watered down or like, yeah, look at me. It's like, no, this is who I am. I genuinely am this person. So show of hands if you have social media. Social media? Cool, all right, so you already started branding yourself. Now, for people who have social media, show of hands if you've recently changed your name on social media. Okay, that's where stuff gets dicey, right? Because if you keep changing your name on social media, people aren't gonna know how to find you. You keep changing your brand, right? I've had one name. I've been OG Penn since I was a kid. I always knew, like, my goal in life as a young man was to grow up to be an old man. That was my only goal. So OG Pin, like that's with 2 N's, and that's where you can find me on Twitter, Instagram. I'm sure if you put it on Facebook, it'll probably lead to my Facebook as well. And so that's something like I just constantly push. And then I have stickers. So like stickers really help. I actually have stickers today, a whole bunch of them. I'll leave them somewhere. But yeah, they're just things like that help with branding. Yeah.
Thank you guys for sharing. How much time do we have for questions from the audience? One question? Okay. 1 minute?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Who is gonna be the winner for a question?
She looks like she's ready.
Here. Okay. So, you wanna come here? Yeah. Or you just wanna? Okay.
How do you go towards the dream job you want after entering the field? So like after you enter, like you're entering the journalism field, like how do you go towards that dream job that you want when you're not there yet?
And what is your name?
Rachel.
Rachel. Okay. So yeah, let's repeat the question.
She said, what do you need to do to go toward your dream job? And, or like when you're already there, like what are the next steps? Does it sound about right? Do y'all want to take it or? Well, so I had an interesting experience. I moved here for my dream job when I was 22. And my dream job was with Deb. We were residents together at this filmmaking, the Center for Investigative Reporting. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've landed my dream job. I'm gonna make documentary films for a living, for full time. I got dental insurance, I'm good. And then that job ended because it was only a year long. So in a way, it wasn't a dream job. I think it's important to remember that your dream job is always growing and shifting and changing. So what I wanted to do when I was, 19, like I said, I wanted to be a staff photographer. That dream job changed, and now my dream job is being an independent filmmaker and being my own boss. My dream job in 20 years might be, I want to be a physical therapist, So reminding yourself that, like, you get to choose what your dream job is every day, and you get to choose what steps you're gonna make to get towards that goal every day. But in a way, remembering that like the process itself is just as important as that end goal. So making sure your dream job is what you're doing every day, as opposed to like, I will get there someday. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Oh, can I jump on that one? All right, so my dream is, I always had the dream of having a heater in the bathroom. Like, having a plush house with a heater next to it. And then this apartment I was staying at just recently, it was really cold, so I just put a heater in the bathroom, like one of those, like, and I was like, I made it. I'm here. You know what I'm saying? But that's it. It's not necessarily about this dream job. It's thinking about it in a broader sense. What's the dream lifestyle that you want? I know I work really hard on Mondays and Tuesdays, and I kind of tail off on Thursday and Friday. So build my schedule so that it permits for that, and really making sure that my work is intertwined with my life.
I don't have anything to add to that. That's great.
Okay, perfect.
What is
one more question?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so we have time for one more question. Oh, here. Yes.
Yep, good.
Can you tell your name and or the organization you are from? What? Your name and the organization that you represent. If
Or
you're
school.
Yeah, school. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I represent Sense. I feel like listening to other stories affect people in different ways sometimes. And I was just wondering, like, is that what keeps you going, or what keeps you going, like, doing things? Because I feel like it's kind of nerve-wracking, like, losing hope in things, like something you want to be in, but it's hopeless. What keeps you going?
So the question is, what keeps you going and keeps you from losing hope in this kind of business? And if hearing other people's stories is a part of.
How does it affect you, or is that what keeps you going?
So if hearing other people's stories, how it affects you, if it takes you away from wanting to keep going or propels you to keep going. I think for me so far, knowing that I have the ability to give other people a platform to have their stories told is very powerful and a responsibility that I take really seriously, and that propels me forward. And I do know, speaking to the other part of your question about, if hearing people's stories can kind of run you, it's starting to be a lot more conversation in documentary film world about, filmmakers taking care of themselves, and people are putting in their budgets for films now, having on-site therapists when they're dealing with really weighty, heavy topics for themselves, for the crew, and for the subjects that are being featured. And I think it's a really interesting thing and an important thing that we do talk about when we're telling these really weighty stories and dealing with violence and all this type of stuff, how we're checking in with ourselves and making sure that it's sustainable for us, but while still taking on this responsibility of knowing that these stories need to be told and that we are in a unique position to help them be told.
So that trailer that you saw for the film Outspoken, we had the first screening of the film that all of the characters and myself were present at in West Virginia last weekend. And there were folks from Parkersburg that carpooled an hour and a half, which is like 80 miles in West Virginia driving, to come to this screening. And one of the people that was at the screening was an older woman. She's probably like 60 or 70, and she told me that she had seen this film 5 times already because it made her feel so comforted, and like people really saw her experience as being a gay woman in this place. And that really brought me hope. I was like, okay, like I've been working on this film for 2 years, and it was really emotionally draining, and there were points where I was like, screw this, I'm gonna get a full-time job, like this work is too difficult. But then you have those moments of like, oh my gosh, this was so worth it, because you get to see the impact that it has. So I think like even when you're in the lowest point of like ready to quit, like you don't have enough money, and to be honest, those times do happen in this field. This is a hard field to be in, but I think everyone in this room has the strength to do it. Reminding yourself of those moments when the payoff exists for your community.
Just to complete what Emily said, sometimes, you know, I'm also working on my own film. Some weeks I'm like, this is the best thing that I'm doing in my life. I love it. The next day I'm like, why am I doing this? So it changed, but I think overall was the best thing that I'm doing in my life. Yeah, so I just wanted to finish with this thought. I want to thank our panelists and the Representation Project for organizing this panel, and all of you for being here this afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. We're going to do a quick brain break, then you'll have the chance to use the restroom, and we'll jump into our next panel. So if we could all bring it in for Anne. Thank you.
Just the janitor cleaning this. It's okay, I'll take care of that. Don't even worry about it.
Okay. All right, everybody stand up.
Don't even worry about it.
Interactive, remember? Okay, so I'm going to demo first, and then we're going to do it together. Make sure you have room on either side of you.
Oh, there's a lot of water here. Wow. Let me move that microphone away from that microwave.
Just dating myself right there. Okay, so just watch really quickly first, okay? So remember, the movement is second, the breathing is the most important part, okay? If you fall asleep at the end of this, seriously, I did my job. Okay. So we're gonna start with the feet hip-width distance apart, and you're gonna lift the chest, and then you're gonna extend the fingertips down, okay? So just watch. So we're gonna do something called sunrise, sunset. We're gonna do 25? No, we're gonna do 5 of them. Remember I told you I taught middle school, so I just need to make sure everybody's present. All right. So just watching, you're gonna do the same thing. You're gonna scaffold the arms. We're gonna inhale, just watch. Exhale, just watch. Inhale. Exhale, you're gonna come forward. So, like I said, I don't care if you reach the ground. Who cares? If you're here, then this is where you are. This is great. This is an awesome day, okay? Or, if you can go lower, go lower. If you can go lower, go lower. If you can go lower, go lower. Oh, look, I can reach the ground today. Okay? And then we're going to breathe here, 2 breaths, and then we're going to come up. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Got it? 25. 5. Ready? All right, feet hip width distance apart. Extend the fingertips down. Let me move back here. Okay. Inhale, the arms up. Exhale, palms up towards the ceiling. Inhale. Exhale, forward bend. Bend the knees if you need to, okay? Come down, drop the head, breathe down here. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale. Bring the fingertips all the way up towards the ceiling. Reach for the sky. Exhale, release the arms to a T position. Inhale, exhale. Okay, let's keep going. Inhale, exhale. Make the breathing count, everybody. Inhale, exhale, forward bend. Bend the knees if you need to. Keep the head down. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale. Fingertips all the way up towards the ceiling. Exhale, release the arms to a T. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, forward bend. Keep the head down. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale. Fingertips all the way up towards the ceiling. Exhale, inhale, exhale. Last two. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, forward bend. Breathe down here. Inhale, keep the head down. Exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale. Fingertips all the way up towards the ceiling. Take the gaze up towards the sky, reach it up. Exhale, release the arms to a T. Inhale, exhale. Okay, last one, make it your best, all right? Inhale. We're gonna go slow. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Keep the head down, 3 breaths. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. The fingertips all the way up towards the ceiling. Reach up right there. Keep the arms up. Inhale. Keep them up. Exhale. Inhale. Lift the fingertips up. One more time. Exhale. Release the arms to a T position. Spread out the fingers. Inhale. Palms facing down. Exhale. Release the arms down. Good job. Shake out the shoulders. All right.